Mark my words, the Southport Massacre cover-up is one of the biggest scandals in British history. And the lengths the establishment, authorities and mainstream media are going in order to stop all debate and all discussion on this topic is truly disturbing, if not surprising. We know they don't trust us mere plebs with information that might impact social cohesion. Like the fact that the bloke accused of stabbing these 3 innocent young girls at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport was reading Al-Qaeda terror manuals and producing ricin. But when our democratically elected representatives, who are meant to be protected by parliamentary privilege, when they are also silenced, seemingly to stop the Prime Minister being asked uncomfortable questions about what he knew when, then you know we are no longer a free society. And I mean that because it is exactly what happened yesterday. My Reform UK sources tell me that their Deputy Leader Richard Tice was planning to put two-tier care on the spot about his clearly misleading answers regarding Southport when he knew the details about Axel Rudakubana. I'm told the plan was really to stick it to the PM by asking, do you think the public is stupid? But check this out. Given the way Westminster works, the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, feared that was the plan by Reform UK and Richard Tice, so he preempted that with an all-out ban.
I wish to remind the House that the following horrendous, terrible incident in Southport on the 29th of July, a suspect is awaiting trial, having been charged with multiple offences. That means the House of Judice resolution is engaged and references should not be made to the case. I know that all honourable members wish to see justice done in this case. It is therefore of paramount importance that nothing is said in this House which could potentially prejudice a proper trial.
But asking what the Prime Minister knew when would not prejudice anything. Now, luckily, Reform UK had suspected that would be the case, though, so they came up with a clever way to subvert the ban.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall KC, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
So despite that holier-than-thou attitude, it was the Prime Minister yet again playing politics with the Southport Massacre. And he has been protected by his friends in Parliament and the MSM because they're all too terrified to touch the story. GB News presenters, for example, have been told not to even mention a Southport cover-up. That is madness. And how has not one journalist asked the Prime Minister or Chancellor today? They're literally sitting in front of these guys. What did you know? That's it. The fact they haven't is proof, folks, that they are all in this together. Now, thank goodness there are a few people within the establishment with the balls to challenge this madness, and the Daily Telegraph is one of the only newspapers covering the story, reporting there is pressure on Starmer to reveal what he knew about Southport and when. In a statement provided to the Daily Telegraph, the former Home Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, said Southport was a terrible tragedy that shocked and appalled the country. At the time, the public and politicians were asking serious questions, and yet the government chose not to come to Parliament or ask the searching questions needed. It is not plausible for the police, Home Secretary, Prime Minister not to have known about the suspect's background until this week. This detail would have materialised within 2 to 3 days of such a devastating and serious incident, with the entire security apparatus focusing on finding answers to key questions. Yvette Cooper and Sir Keir Starmer need to explain what they knew when, and also explain their subsequent approach to the protests that took place at the time, as they were the ones who did not come to Parliament or address the legitimate questions people were asking. Now, that is such a significant intervention there, and I really praise Priti Patel for that intervention. She is the only Conservative politician outside the two leadership candidates, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, who have. And of course, she knows. She was Home Secretary. She knows about all of this. But how is Priti Patel's intervention not rating a mention on any other news service all day? Nothing on Sly News, nothing on the British Bashing Corporation, nothing on the captured and cowering GB News. So honestly, I can't tell you how important this independent media revolution that I'm part of is going to be. And that's why I am so grateful you are supporting Outspoken, because we have to ask the questions that the MSM won't, and now that MPs won't be allowed to ask. Katie Hopkins summed up the situation well today.
The government knew all along that this individual is a radicalised individual. He's got the facial hair to prove it. He's got the documentation to prove it. Goodness knows what they've got from his tech and his gadgets and the rest of it. But it doesn't matter. They all knew, which means Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper and all the rest of them with their flowers and their sad faces all knew. At the same time, point two, as they all knew, they were prepared to lie to your faces. So they pushed out deliberately the government, the powerful, the controlling religious organisations, the money, the establishment, the different religions that work together with certain religions to control everything. Pushed out what they wanted you to believe. Oh, Welsh Christian. Oh, look at the pictures of him in the choir. Oh, look at the pictures of him as a young child.
There are a couple of guiding lights in the mainstream media. One is Alison Pearson at the Daily Telegraph. The other, Douglas Murray, who wrote in today's Spectator. There are certain rules in British public life that are worth noting, such as this one. If someone is killed by a jihadist or someone who could plausibly be connected to immigration in any way, the British public will not be informed of the possible motive, or at least not until it becomes impossible to conceal it any longer. Certain rules follow on from this. One is that wise heads will inform anyone who does mention a likely motive that they must be exceptionally careful not to prejudice any forthcoming trial. There then comes an insistence that there will be a time and a place to debate these things. Quite often, that time and place never arrives. And this is when people can surmise something with considerable accuracy. If the attacker had been a far-right extremist of the kind we are told of so often, and had shouted, "I'm doing this for Oswald Mosley," then we would have heard about it. If the attacker had said all Taylor Swift fans must be killed, we might also have heard about it. But there was silence. Brilliant from Douglas Murray. And the thing is, that is one of the biggest disturbing issues with this cover-up. All of the usual suspects, including Yvette Cooper, including Keir Starmer, are hiding behind contempt of court laws that they don't give a damn about when talking about non-Islamist criminals. As Paul Embry wrote on his Substack, after discovering the ricin and Al-Qaeda manual, why didn't police declare Southport a terrorist incident? They say it's because they haven't established a motive, but that didn't stop them doing exactly that in other cases. What's going on? And Colin Brazier added, ministers can't be allowed to ignore questions raised by Southport. In particular, they must explain the apparent discrepancy between instantly defining some lone wolf assailants as far right, while insisting on delays and stressing mental health when it suspects Islamism. But that is exactly what the Speaker Lindsay Hoyle stopped yesterday. Just think about this for a second. It is now impossible for any MP to question the PM or any minister, actually, including Yvette Cooper, about anything to do with Southport until after the trial in January. There's a lot I know that I cannot report without being thrown in prison, but I can at least talk about the cover-up. Now, there are already fears, by the way, that this trial could actually be pushed back by a number of months. It's meant to be in January. If that happens, you know why. They want to push this discussion into the long grass for as long as possible. As Peter Whittle suggests for the new Culture Forum, the authorities are using our natural belief in justice to gaslight and mislead us.
Now, the authorities exploit our residual belief in the rule of law, yet they show no such respect for proper procedures themselves. Back in August, they crowed about 1,000 arrests being made in the aftermath of the civil disorder which resulted from those deaths. Yet in that same tweet, they disgustingly referred to those charged as criminals. We all saw during this time how the law was pressed into action remarkably quickly. People were demonized by the government's handmaidens in the media. They were jailed for things written on social media. Since then, a protester who did nothing violent has died in jail. The authorities announced the new charges yesterday, a full 3 months after the atrocity which left 3 children dead and another 8 injured. Now, a full sweep of Rudakubana's house would have happened almost immediately. Ricin and terrorist instruction manuals would have been found. Yet for weeks, for months, there was silence from the authorities. It is hard to emphasize quite how big a scandal this is.
I agree with Peter Whittle. This is one of the biggest scandals of our time. One of the biggest cover-ups of our time. But what the problem is that we now have a mainstream media infected by the woke mind virus who believe that their job is to protect their guys. And their guys are Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper. The fact that Yvette Cooper is grilled by her own husband, Ed Balls, himself a former Labour cabinet minister, and that is considered acceptable by Ofcom, or the Ofcommunists as I call them, tells you that they are all in this together. But here's the thing. Those in power can only keep this story covered up for so long. Axel Rudakubana will eventually face trial. And we will never forget that this is what they did. Now, the uncancelled interview. And I'm delighted to be joined today by the academic and author who writes for Conservative Home, The Critic magazine, Conservatives magazine, and the Tory Reform Group, Dr Daniel Pitt. Dr Pitt, so great to have you on the show today. How do you feel about the Southport Massacre cover-up?
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. Much appreciated. Last time that we saw each other was at the Freedom Festival at the University of Buckingham, organised by the Margaret Thatcher Centre. And that just reminds me of essentially the concept of freedom has radically changed in our country. And the freedom now, if the freedom of the press and the idea of consent has changed. That the idea of that policing, that the Peelite from Robert Peel tradition of policing by consent, you cannot give your consent to something that you are not informed about. You cannot consent to a certain type of policing if you are not informed about it. So it fundamentally undercuts our conception of what policing should be in our country, which is disturbing at times. How do I feel about it? Well, as a father of 3 young children, I am very, it's emotional. I find physically, I feel it tightening of the chest about this, to think about those children who were enjoying their favorite singer. I'm a Swiftie, but I'm more of a Jonathan Swift chap rather than a Taylor Swift chap. But to think that something wholesome of enjoying a party, listening to pop music, and this comes in, and this is what the thing about it, it feels so alien. It feels so alien to our culture that this attack would happen. And that's why we wanted to dive deeper into that. What were the reasons? What's the motive behind this attack? And who is doing it?
No, indeed. And look, you speak about policing and policing by consent. So what I want to do is take a look at a few videos from over that period and get you to analyse whether we were being told the truth or whether we can now categorically say this was part of a cover-up. So I will start by showing you the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. Now, this was in Parliament after the Southport Massacre and when there was unrest on the streets. I mean, I like the fact that Priti Patel called them protests, actually, rather than riots, because I don't think they're riots, but that's a separate discussion. But this is what Yvette Cooper had to say in Parliament.
Extremely important that people don't spread damaging misinformation online. False information has already been extensively shared in the last 24 hours. Those who do this for their own purposes risk undermining a crucial criminal investigation. And I ask everyone to show some respect for the community in Southport and for families who are grieving and in trauma.
But Dr Daniel Pitt, they were not spreading misinformation, as it turned out. Wasn't the government?
It's fascinating, the wording there, that it's very vague. You're assuming who's the Home Secretary's directing it at. I think she's done that on purpose, because you could say who's the people who are doing the misinformation. She's not saying who that is. Now, the information that we know now is that the misinformation could come from the government, from the police, or at the very least, that information has not been presented to the public, who are, you could think of, informed adults, reasonable adults, that can then make their own decisions about the case going forward. But this is the point, that it's actually very, very vague in the way that she does it. She doesn't specify who's actually sending it. It's just people online.
Indeed. And then we actually have the police themselves. And surely in a situation like this, you should be able to trust the police. But what was so concerning to me is that after the Southport incident, we actually heard very little from the Merseyside police. There was certainly no condemnation of the specific attacker. As soon as the so-called riots happened, they took a completely different tone. I mean, it was the same thing with Yvette Cooper, but it was all about demonizing these people on the streets in a way that we simply do not hear when they're talking about Islamist terrorism. So this is Serena Kennedy during the so-called riot.
What I would say to those people who think they've got away with being involved in the disorder on Tuesday or on Saturday, you absolutely haven't got away with it. We are coming for you. We've got hours of social media footage. We've got hours of CCTV footage. I've got officers working round the clock to identify who you are, where you live, where you work. We are coming for you. We'll be coming for you for the next few days. We'll be coming for you for the next few months. So you might get to next week. You might be sitting with a cup of tea thinking, phew, I've got away with it. please let me reassure you, you haven't got away with it. We are coming for you. You will feel the full force of the law.
But first, we've been told our whole lives that wrinkle creams were the easiest way to look younger. Now one doctor says that's nothing but old news. According to Dr John Lake, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most wrinkle fixers on the market are nothing but glorified moisturizers. He says they hardly make a dent on your appearance, and some can even be harmful to your skin. Recently, Dr. Lake has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practices. Why? So that he can pursue a revolutionary anti-aging breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetic industry. He says it's almost like Photoshop for your face. You may even be mad after seeing how easy it is to visibly erase wrinkles from view. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the age rewinder method because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. So in light of this amazing breakthrough, Dr. Lake has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. If this helps even one person look younger or feel more confident, I'll be thrilled knowing I helped, Dr. Lake told reporters. The video has since gone viral. At first, it was shared by users on Facebook, but since then it's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, the comments and feedback have been outstanding, with thousands of women reporting they look decades younger. One viewer even commented, "Best results of anything I've used. I can't believe how well this works. I'll never stop using this. I don't understand how it works, but the results are great. Thank you." So you can find out more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/outspoken, or you can just click on the link in the description box below. Let me repeat, bhmd1.com/outspoken. Now, there is one thing Dr. Lake asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please share this video with your friends and loved ones. Together, we have the power to help as many women reclaim a youthful look as possible. So go watch the video at bhmd1.com/outspoken right now, or just click on the link in the description box below. But now, back to the show. Now, I have real questions for Chief Constable Serena Kennedy for taking that type of approach, because we never hear the police talking about Islamist terrorists in that way. We know there's thousands of them up and down the country, Dr. Daniel Pitt, who are planning attacks. And we didn't hear her after Southport come out and say, if you attack our young girls at a Taylor Swift dance concert, you will be arrested. It really felt like the police were so comfortable to be strident when they were dealing with, let's be honest, predominantly white working class protesters.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you did your digest at the very beginning, you mentioned about woke ideology. And in woke ideology, there is from like Michael Foucault, the left-wing firebrand, there is the Frankfurt School, and which drives from Marxism. And they say that there are two types of groups in society. There are the oppressors and the oppressee. And you can see that this is included in the way that the police are dealing with these incidences, is that you've got to tread lightly when someone, a victim or the purported person conducting their victim, they think it's a victim, is then going on to commit crime because they're oppressed. It's society has done this. It's the West who's inflicted on this on them, and inverted commas far right people are not. They're the oppressors. They're oppressors. So when they do it, it's just blatantly full-blown crime. So that you can see this ideology completely, that it warps.
Yeah, so there's no sympathy. I think that's absolutely fascinating analysis, actually. There's no sympathy if you are a white working class protester who might be considered part of the far right because according to woke ideology, which is, by the way, setting out to destroy the West. I had Ayan Hirsi Ali the other day on the show talking about that. But according to woke ideology, you are guilty. You are guilty, effectively, of historic crimes. And actually, if you're an attacker, despite the fact that you have potentially invaded this country illegally, putting our citizens at risk, according to the woke ideology, you're still considered some sort of victim. And I think you can really tell that in the tone of Chief Constable Serena Kennedy. So we saw her talking during the riots. I now want to show you her press conference yesterday, when she is announcing the new charges against Axel Rudakubana. Sorry, this was 2 days ago, that press conference. And her tone is completely different. Watch.
Today, the Crown Prosecution Service has authorised Axel Rudakubana, aged 18, from Lancashire, to be charged with 2 further offences. Axel Rudakubana already faces 3 charges of murder, 10 charges of attempted murder, and 1 charge of possession of a knife, all relating to the incident at Hart Street on the 29th of July 2024. The 2 further offences relate to evidence obtained by Merseyside Police during searches of Axel Rudakubana's home address, as part of a lengthy and complex investigation which has been ongoing since the 29th of July. The additional charges are the production of a biological toxin, namely ricin, contrary to Section 1 of the Biological Weapons Act 1974, and possession of information, namely a PDF file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual.
Dr. Pitt, Serena Kennedy went on to say that we shouldn't speculate, that we've all got to be very careful, of course, contempt of court, I understand that, but also that despite that information that she revealed, the police still do not consider the Southport Massacre, which Axel Rudakubana has been charged, a terror attack, because they can't establish motivation. It's nuts, isn't it?
It does feel that way. That you treating these acts as separate. These are incredibly serious offences. Biological, essentially a weapon, and under the Terrorist Act, and then to see how they don't link together. I find that hard to.
Well, indeed. And also, what about the fact that ricin is being produced at this residential address? I mean, surely that constitutes a serious breach of public safety, and that we do have a right to know before the trial. But I think one of the big problems here is that the mainstream media is so terrified now. And when I spoke to Robert Jenrick about this earlier in the week on the show, he's, of course, one of the 2 candidates for the Conservative Party leadership. I personally hope that he will be leader. The poll has now closed, so if you're a Conservative Party member, I hope you've voted and done the right thing. But that's beside the point. What I respect here is that he is calling out the mainstream media, because what we saw was them covering the Southport Massacre in a very squeamish manner, which means they're not asking the questions that must be asked.
I don't want people to be calling out incidents, squeamishly or selectively, as we saw earlier in the summer. In fact, I want the media to be able to speak about these things much more openly than they are today. I'm worried that we are sliding into the position that we see in some other European countries like Germany, where there is censorship, either by regulation or self-censorship, and serious crimes that are being committed, for example, by illegal migrants on the streets, are not being covered properly out of fear for community tensions and community cohesion issues. That is wrong. And we need to be ensuring that our media are calling out what is happening, no veil of secrecy being drawn over what's happening on our own streets. That is letting the British public down.
And the thing is, Daniel, that I find it truly astonishing that there are journalists who have been sitting down over the past 2 days with senior government ministers, with the Prime Minister, with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, not with Yvette Cooper, I haven't seen anyone sit down with her, but with all of those senior government figures, and they have not asked one question about Southport. And the problem is, this is where groupthink comes in. And the groupthink is, oh, Lindsay Hoyle said in the House, we can't ask anything about this because we might be prejudicing the case. Well, I'm sorry, you can, because look at the statement from Priti Patel. She is a former Home Secretary. She is not going to say anything that is going to prejudice an active court case. But you can ask the question of, what did you know? When did you know this information? Why was it not released to the public? That will not prejudice any case.
Well, groupthink is a huge problem in many of our institutions, that people don't get to hear the opposite side of the arguments. And John Stuart Mill, a great Victorian Liberal, he argued that was not just a negative outcome for the present, but also for the future generations that don't get to find out the truth. And unfortunately, in our legal systems, since essentially Statute Acts going back to the New Labour years, that you've gone from laws that protect the individual to actually speak to the person who's then the person who takes the offence. And this is the big difference. People are scared to offend people. They are scared to offend. And because of that, they don't speak up. Groupthink or continues. And we don't therefore have the basic of truth coming out, or even error. That when error actually is just as important as truth. When we find out that we've erred and we've got things wrong, clashing with the truth means that we can correct that, and then the groupthink dissolves. But that's the point. If you get things wrong and you say the wrong thing, that's it. You are done. Cheerio. You are cancelled.
Oh yeah. Well, look, I know about that more than anyone else. But the great thing is that I'm no longer part of any groupthink. I mean, I think one of the reasons I was cancelled, by the way, is because I refused to be part of groupthink. But you're right. It's so appalling. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.